Okay, everyone. So I am here to give you guys my thoughts on Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 22. Now, before we get into it, this is going to be a bit different than how I normally do my reviews for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. So normally it's more, written and recorded and edited. But unfortunately for this one, I don't really have the time to actually sit down and record and edit my videos the way I usually do. So for this chapter, I'm going to effectively go through the chapter sort of similar to how I used to review the chapters, where it was more so just hit record and just give you guys my thoughts. Sort of more of a podcast style. So yeah, we're going to be doing that for this chapter, and I don't know if I'm going to do the same for the next chapter or if I'm going to go back to what I used to do, where I actually write my thoughts down and I'll actually do some editing for the video and just sort of what I've been doing for my reviews for the past couple of years, as opposed to doing this, which is again more similar to what I originally did for my boards reviews and other reviews that I do here on this channel. So anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way, and let's just go ahead and jump right into this. So this is Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 22, and the title for this is Jura, and we've got Boruto here on the cover, and the cover art has just been absolutely amazing for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. Again, say what you want about the story, you can't deny that the artwork has been pretty damn good. It is better now than it was before. In all honesty, I wasn't a big fan of the art for the manga and even the cover art for Boruto Next Generations. It didn't really sit well with me. But then as time went on, the art got a lot better. And it's just, again, getting better and better as the series moved forward. Going all the way into the latter half of Boruto, Naruto Next Generations, and now we're into Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, where it's just been really, really good. So we're here at the beginning of the chapter, and we see Ryu's Thorn Soul, obviously from Ryu being destroyed because of Sarada's new Mangekyo Sharingan technique. And we've got Mitsuki and Raya looking at it, and of course they plan on going to get it, but this is where they get probably the last person they ever expected to actually show up, where we see Jura. Now, obviously, as we saw from the previous chapter, Jura, like what Kashin Koji told Boruto, he sensed that Boruto was here, and now he's officially here in the battlefield, and he appears in front of Mitsuki and Raya from one of the claw grinds that Ryu summoned into the battlefield to help him win, which, obviously didn't end up working. And yeah, we see Jura here, and Mitsuki immediately notices who this is because he remembers the description that Boruto gave to the Konoha Shinobi when he was captured by them. And then, interestingly enough, Jura immediately flies up after he looks at Sarada, and I'm guessing this is him probably looking at her, knowing through obviously his connection with Ryu what Sarada is actually capable of, and how her technique is something that he needs to actually be aware of, because that's one thing that Jura does actually do that I do like about his character, is that he's not one of these typical shonen typical shonen antagonists where he just thinks so highly of himself that he doesn't even take anyone else into consideration when it comes to their threat level. He just thinks he's so far above them that he doesn't take them seriously, and he usually ends up, biting them. But Jura, despite knowing how strong he is, despite knowing that the others don't stand a chance in actually killing him, he still doesn't underestimate them. So he has this moment where he's looking at Sarada, and I'm just wondering if he's maybe thinking about taking precautions for the future, because he knows that, her ability could be a problem in the future. And we learned from Kashin Koji that her awakening her Mangekyo and her awakening her ability is going to be important, because it's apparently going to play a role in the future of this series and play a role in actually taking down Jura. So he flies up and he immediately looks away, assuming, I'm guessing he's, of course, looking in the direction of where Boruto actually is. And this is where we cut to Boruto and Konohamaru, and Matsuri is just on the ground. She's in pieces. And Konohamaru is just surprised that he managed to take, her down so quickly. But Boruto clarifies, and this is where we get a bit of a statement about their power, which, we've been getting this for a while now. But as I've been saying in previous videos, guys, right now, I think that what we need is less of statements about their power, and we need to actually see them. We need to see them demonstrate their power, and we need to see them actually win. We can't just keep seeing them lose over and over again. We have to see them actually win. I'm not just talking about Jura. They can't make the same mistake that they did with Kara, where you have the Kara inners and they're stated to be Otsutsuki level, but every fight we saw them in ended with them losing, and we never saw them actually winning. And we need to actually see that if you want to really establish villains as a threat, you need to have them actually win fights and not just have them consistently lose over and over again. We need to actually have them see that. But we get the statement from Boruto where he clarifies that the only reason why he was able to take out Matsuri so easily is because she was already wounded, she was already heavily injured. And he clarifies that if she was at full power, then he wouldn't have been able to take her out that easily, which again is a statement to Matsuri and the other awakened Shinju's power. But like I said, we need to actually see it now. We can't just keep going off of statements by characters. And this is where, of course, we see Matsuri's Thorn Soul about to form. And then Boruto immediately notices a hole in the ground from one of Jura's mini Bijudamas, that we've been seeing him fire, before in the series. And this is where Jura notices that, his attack missed, which I do think is a little bit of just a little bit of a bit of a sort of plot convenience, because before Jura was able to snipe Boruto from a far distance, no problem. Even though it missed his vitals, he still managed to hit him. So the fact that he missed now, when Boruto didn't even know Jura was here until this very moment, it's just, just feels like a little bit of plot armor. You know what I mean? So yeah, his attack missed, and then Jura immediately flies towards Boruto. And Mitsuki immediately notices that he's going towards where Konohamaru actually is. Now, Mitsuki, of course, doesn't know that Boruto's here. Maybe he'll sense him later on, or maybe Konohamaru will tell them what's going on when he later goes towards the direction of where Konohamaru, or not Konohamaru, but where Mitsuki and Oreya is. Mitsuki, Oreya, and Sarada, and of course Yoda, who's on the ground, possibly dead, most likely dead. And this is where, Konohamaru gets the Thorn Soul. I do find it interesting that the Thorn Soul formed next to Konohamaru and basically falls right into his hand. And I wonder if that has to do with Matsuri's, lingering feelings for Konohamaru that she inherited from Moegi. I do wonder if that has something to do with that. But yeah, it gets to Konohamaru. And, Konohamaru once again asks Boruto whether this is going to restore Moegi. But Boruto, of course, is more focused on what's going on with Jura. And this is where Boruto is telling Konohamaru that he needs to leave right now because Jura is on his way, and Boruto, of course, knows that Konohamaru is easily going to get killed by Jura if he doesn't leave immediately, because Jura, of course, is probably going to target him because he has Matsuri's Thorn Soul, which he is probably going to try and get back. Even though he is prioritizing Boruto first, eventually he is going to get to Konohamaru, and that's not going to end well for him. And interestingly enough, we see Konohamaru notice something here with Boruto. Boruto tells him to take the thorn bulb, go to Sarada and the others, and basically go to where you guys met up first, and basically that's where you'll get further instructions. And we get a look from Konohamaru, and what's interesting is that Boruto may have actually outed something that he shouldn't have outed because he's so focused on Jura that he doesn't even realize what he did. He basically revealed to Konohamaru that he has information on this mission, information that he should not have, meaning that he knows that someone is leaking information to Boruto. And really, there's only one possible suspect for who it actually could be, and it's Shikamaru. And of course, it's going to connect to what Konohamaru remembers from his conversation with Shikamaru, where Konohamaru just flat out asks, hey, where are you getting this information? It doesn't seem plausible that you would have this information. And of course, it connects to Boruto and how Boruto just conveniently happens to be in specific locations at specific times, where it seems a little bit too convenient, like how he showed up when Coach showed up, how he showed up when Hidari and Jura showed up. It just seems a bit strange that he conveniently happens to be there at the proper time, almost like someone is telling him this is what's going on. And I think Konohamaru is going to figure out that Shikamaru is feeding Boruto information. But Boruto, again, I think he is so focused on what's going on with Jura that he doesn't even realize that he, in a way, possibly just outed Shikamaru for being I guess, kind of an undercover agent, someone who's helping Boruto without, him actually without him being legally allowed to do that. Because remember, Boruto is still considered a rogue shinobi. And yeah, we see Jura flying towards him, fires another Bijudama, and not a miniature one like the one before. This one was meant to just outright destroy them because we see the explosion from his Bijudama. And yeah, that absolutely would have killed them had it hit, had it actually hit them. Or at least it would have killed Konohamaru. Maybe Boruto could have possibly, sorry, just hit the mic, would have possibly been able to defend himself against it. But yeah, Konohamaru would have been dead if that actually hit him. But yeah, Boruto throws Konohamaru away. And Konohamaru, of course, prioritized leaving because even though, again, Konohamaru still has mixed feelings about Boruto, he's prioritizing what he needs to do right now, which is to take the Thorn Bulb and take it back to Moegi in Konoha and be able to restore Moegi, or take Matsuri's Thorn Bulb, take it back to Konoha and restore Moegi is what I'm trying to say. Now, Jura is watching Konohamaru, and Boruto, of course, takes that opportunity to use Flying Thunder God to sneak up behind him and basically use the same move that he used against Hidari against Jura. But we see in this panel that Jura immediately, just like Hidari, notices Boruto there, but doesn't react fast enough to be able to actually stop the attack, which that's one of the benefits of Flying Thunder God, is that it's so quick that you have to be really quick yourself to be able to immediately defend yourself against it. I think one example that I can think of, or a couple of examples, is when Madara dodged Tobirama's attack, and when Obito, when he was a Tensei Jinchuriki, was able to react to Minato's attack. But keep in mind, both Minato and Tobirama were Edo Tenseis at the time, and it was established that Edo Tenseis are not as strong, meaning that both Minato and Tobirama weren't as fast as they normally would have been had they been alive. But I do wonder if they still would have been able to actually tag them had they been alive and not Edo Tenseis. Based on what we're seeing here with Boruto, I'm guessing they probably would have. Madara, I think, knew that Tobirama would have been able to hit him had he been alive at his full strength. Same thing with Minato and what happened with him and Obito. I think he would have been able to hit him because Flying Thunder God just gives you such a big advantage in battles. But as we're about to see, the Flying Raijin, for all of its benefits, is no different than any other technique that we see in Boruto or in just the Naruto series in general, because once you've used it enough, people start to figure out how you use it and they can react to it. So he hits Jura with the Rasengan, but it just does no damage. So remember when he used it against Hidari, like I said, we saw him physically take damage from it, so much so that he had to retreat back to the Ten Tails dimension and have the tree heal him. But with Jura, it just does no damage to it whatsoever. And I do wonder if this is Jura possibly remembering the fight with Hidari, because remember, we now know he is connected to all of the awakened Shinju. So that means he would have been connected to Hidari when he was fighting against Boruto and Sarada and the others. So he probably already knew this was a strategy Boruto would use and was able to defend himself against it, just in case Boruto tries to use that attack against him. And then Jura turns around, fires a Bijudama, which Boruto again uses Flying Thunder God to dodge the attack, and tries to hit Jura with the same move. Jura sees Boruto disappearing, and of course correctly guesses that Boruto's about to do to me now what he did before, except this time instead of a Rasengan, he's about to use his sword to try and attack him. But Jura immediately reacts and is able to block his attack with one finger. He's able to block Boruto's attack with one finger, the same attack that we've seen Boruto use to slice up the awakened Shinju before. Jura just blocks it like it's nothing. And like I said, he this time was able to actually react and block Boruto's attack because Boruto tried to use the same move twice, and it just did not work. And this is where we get an interesting statement from Jura, where he obviously knows that Boruto is using Flying Raijin, and he points out how he has this bad habit of basically getting excited whenever he's fighting a strong opponent. And of course, this is the same statement that was stated about Jigen, about how Jigen has this bad habit of essentially always getting a little too carried away in a fight. And I am wondering, of course, if this is going to possibly lead to something in the future of the series with Jura. So then we cut to a conversation between Kashin Koji and Ada, where Ada seems to think that Boruto is possibly going to effectively gain a win because she obviously can see that Boruto is holding his own against Jura, and she's asking Kashin Koji once again, does he really have no chance? And Koji once again says, no, there's absolutely no way he can win, at least not with the current sequence of events. And even points out that Boruto himself is very much well aware of the fact that he can't win against Jura. And I just want to focus on this right here real quick. So he says that not with the current sequence of events. So we know that Kashin Koji has been trying to orchestrate everything to happen in a certain way because he knows that based on what he's seen in the future with 10 directions, there's only one way that they can actually win against Jura and the other awakened Shinju. And Kashin Koji flat out says that, Boruto, with what's happening currently, there's no way he can win. And it just tells you again that Kashin Koji firmly believes that there's really only one way for them to actually get out of this and make it to the best possible conclusion that ends with them winning against Jura and Jura not being able to plant a divine tree and growing the chakra fruit and essentially the world ending. And I do wonder if the story is going in the direction of it basically proving Kashin Koji is wrong, that it wasn't just one way to end up getting the victory, that maybe we are going to end up going a different path and maybe it's going to require things to happen differently because Kashin Koji, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but his ability is reliant on information that is available at the moment, because remember, he himself explained when Boruto asked about his ability that it highly requires, it can basically show him the future based on what's happening currently, based on where things could go, all resulting from where people are at the moment. So for example, if let's say someone decides to, or maybe he sees the future and he sees that one person is going to either decide to go, let's say he's traveling down the road and he could either go left or right. And in one future he goes left and in one future he goes right. And once a decision is made, the other one doesn't exist anymore. So let's say if he decides to go left, the one where he decided to go right doesn't exist anymore. Like now it's just this direction. But what if, for example, when the guy gets to that turn that he's supposed to make, instead of either going left or right, he decides to just move straight forward and decides to find a way to get to where he wants by just going forward. That's a decision that he made that Kashin Koji didn't see, and now it creates a completely new branching timeline where it's giving birth to all these new possibilities, all these possible futures. You see what I mean? Like that's sort of just a sort of like a basic sort of summarization of what his ability kind of, is in a way. It's sort of like reliant on information that you have now currently. But again, if someone makes a decision that he didn't expect, it could cause all of these new timelines to exist, one that he completely isn't aware of. And he even told Boruto about this. That's why he specified that the less people know about his ability, the better, because once people know that there's someone out there who knows the future and what's going to happen, it's going to affect their thinking. And then all of a sudden it's going to cause them to make different decisions than the ones they made in the futures that he saw. And then once that happens, all of that information that he had, poof, goes away because it's completely useless. It's completely useless right now. And yeah, just again, what he said right here were the current sequence of events. Just wanted to talk about that real quick because I do find Koji's ability interesting. And I might actually do a video where I just talk about that in particular, because again, I do think there's a lot of stuff that could be discussed about that. And Ada goes on to mention afterwards, why doesn't he just, teleport away? Wouldn't that make it easier? And Koji says he can't even if he wants to. Number one, his ability is very tricky. So in order to get away, he has to spend time concentrating. And obviously he can't give Jura the opportunity to kill him while he's focusing on one of the objects that he has that's further away from him. And even if he could, he still can't, because he knows that if he does, then Jura is going to put his attention on Konohamaru and the others, and they're going to be in danger. And he's obviously not going to let that happen. So he's basically stuck there. And I just want to once again focus on, this explanation for Boruto's ability. And I do find it interesting that Boruto's new ability, his version of flying Raijin, just consistently keeps being explained to us, because I think that they probably knew that a lot of people were probably going to find it a bit confusing how his ability is different than Minato's, how it's different than Tobirama's. And they keep once again reiterating that his ability is different and that Boruto is just not as good at using it as Minato and Tobirama. Like it's a variation on Flying Raijin, but it's not the exact technique. And so there are weaknesses that can be exploited. And so, yeah, basically Kashin Koji once again confirms that, yeah, at this point, Boruto, like, he has no chance of winning and he's basically screwed, which again is what he tried to warn Boruto of all this time. But Boruto, being Boruto, being Naruto's kid, of course he wasn't going to listen. So, yeah, not really surprising that Boruto ended up doing it. I think a lot of us kind of predicted that Boruto was going to end up doing this. I think, like, I personally was hoping he was going to stay out of it, because I would like to see like battles being resolved that don't have Boruto just coming in to save the day. I've talked about this before, but I really hope they don't keep going with this trend of just Boruto showing up to just save the day. And the thing about it is like, even in Naruto, where the amount of times where Naruto himself showed up to end up saving the day, it didn't happen as often as I think people might think it did. Like, there are times where Boruto or where Naruto did play a part, but that's just it. He just played a part in the defeat of an enemy. It wasn't that he showed up and he was the one who ended up taking down the enemy. You know what I mean? Again, that did happen a couple of times, but that's just it. It only happened a few times. For the majority of the story, Naruto helped, but he wasn't like 100% the only reason why they were even able to win. You know what I mean? But what we've been getting with Two Blue Vortex is Boruto essentially being the reason why they were able to get the victory, because they powered him up so much that the others just like they're not on his level. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. I think that we're probably going to see what we usually see with a lot of shonen, where you have a character who is above everyone else in terms of power, but then slowly they start to reach his level, and eventually like they work together in order to be able to take down an enemy. And so we get this, we cut back to Boruto and Jura, and this is where we get an interesting moment. So it starts with Jura basically wondering, like, okay, how is it that you already have this information? It's not possible for you to have this information, because we literally just got created. We only just got created a few days ago, and there's no way you could have all this information about us. You have to have someone feeding you this information. And he wants to know who, which obviously we know that it's Kashin Koji, and he has all this information because of 10 directions. So Jura obviously wants to know who's the one that's feeding him this information. And Boruto, of course, is not going to give him up, because that's just not who Boruto is. And he also knows what Kashin Koji told him, where he can't reveal Kashin Koji and he can reveal what he knows, or specifically his ability, because it's just going to be bad for them. And Boruto is thinking to himself, okay, he took no damage from the Rasengan, or at least he's thinking maybe he did take damage, or he's just not showing it. But I don't think he did. Like we saw earlier, like he did not take any damage from the Rasengan. It didn't work. Or if it did, he just healed from it completely, like what we saw with Himawari, where a lot of the damage she took just got insta healed because of her being Kurama's new host. And Boruto was thinking, okay, my other abilities aren't working. I have to use Uzuhiko. So yeah, Boruto's preparing to use the Rasengan Uzuhiko. And the next thing we get, and this is the interesting part. Again, I've been liking what we've been getting with the Awakened Shinju so far, and their quest for knowledge, their quest for humanity, and just understanding these principles that just come so naturally to us as as people. They're trying to understand things. And what Jura wants to understand is what love is. And he wants to know why they, as people, despite knowing that it can be a weakness, they still choose to act on it. You know what I mean? Like, he talks about how Boruto had to know that he stood no chance of winning against Jura in a fight. And yet, despite that, he still showed up. He still came here because of the love that he has for his friends. And he's just wondering, why is it that people still act on, even though they know in their mind that this is a weakness that could be exploited. Why do they still allow their emotions to take over? And that's when we see him try to use wood style to trap Boruto. And Boruto was dodging, but he can only, dodge so much. And he even points out how unless he keeps his feet planted on solid ground, he can't use Uzuhiko. And this is, of course, a callback to his fight against Hidari. Because as we learned in I think the last two chapters, Jura is connected to the awakened Shinju. He was connected to Hidari, meaning that everything Hidari experienced, everything he heard, was all transferred back to Jura. So Jura knows that Boruto needs to have both feet planted on the ground in order for him to use Uzuhiko, and he's not allowing him to do that. So we're seeing Jura making use of that knowledge, which I do like. I do like that they are following up on that. And we see Boruto do get caught by surprise by one of Jura's wood style attacks, and he drops Sasuke's sword, and then he gets trapped by Jura's attack. And Boruto is physically hurt, like he is actually hurt right now. And we see Jura walking towards Boruto, and he passes by Sasuke's sword. And this is where Boruto, I think, put into motion the plan that he set up at the moment, where when Jura was close to Sasuke's sword, he points out how, listen, this is something that's important to me. Don't do anything to it. Otherwise, you're going to be really sorry. Basically, he gives him that whole thing. And then Jura once again points out how once again, you're going to get hurt because of love. And he basically tries to make a deal with Boruto, saying that, okay, how about this? If you tell me where your accomplice is, if you tell me where Kashin Koji is, he doesn't say that, but if you give me that, I will give you back the sword and I'm not going to do anything to it. But either way, I'm still going to kill you afterwards. So, but hey, at least nothing will happen to your sword, right? And Boruto responds to Jura's question about love. And he says, you know what? You're right. Love is a flaw. It is absolutely a weakness to us. But despite that, okay, I'm back. So I'm really sorry, guys. I don't know what happened. I had some technical issues, but they're all resolved. So let's pick back up where we left off. So what I was saying earlier is that Boruto responds to Jura's question from earlier about, love, and how despite people knowing that it's a flaw, that it's a weakness, they still choose to act on it sometimes. And Boruto's response to that is basically, and this comes right after he manages to activate Uzuhiko. So what he did, if there's anyone watching this and they're confused as to how Boruto was able to use Uzuhiko despite the fact that he was captured, he still was technically connected to the ground because the tree that Jura used to trap Boruto was connected to the ground. So Boruto just used that as a way to essentially connect to the ground, the earth's chakra, to gather it up and use it for Uzuhiko to activate it. And then this is where we get Boruto's response. And he basically says that because Jura not understanding people choosing to act on love despite knowing that it's a flaw, despite knowing that it's a weakness, is exactly why they'll never be anything more than just trees. Basically, what he was telling Jura is that that's essentially what makes people human. It's what makes us human, that we still choose to act on our emotions despite knowing that it can be a flaw, despite knowing that it doesn't make any sense logically. We still choose to prioritize our emotions because, again, it's part of being human. And being human is essentially to be flawed. Like, we are not perfect. We do things that don't make any sense logically, but we still choose to do it because we understand that there are some things that are just more important than logic. And Boruto is essentially trying to relay that information to Jura effectively before he believes that he's about to kill him with, the Rasengan Uzuhiko, telling him that essentially until you understand that essentially that concept of humanity or humans basically are inherently flawed, you'll never be anything more than just trees. And I do wonder, okay, with this information, where is it going to go in the future? How is it going to connect to, or is he going to relay this information to the other awakened Shinju, to Hidari and Mamushi, and possibly Matsuri and Ryu if he gets there thorn souls, their thorn bulbs back, and chooses to revive them the same way he did with Hidari. So this is where we see Boruto essentially teleporting to the back of Jura using his sword as a marker. Because remember, his sword is also another marker, or Sasuke's sword that he, got from him. And this is where he connects Jura with the Rasengan Uzuhiko. Now, what I do find interesting is that Jura does see Boruto there, so he had time to react to it, but he didn't. And I wonder if it's because what we see later on in the chapter, and he connects the Rasengan Uzuhiko, it blows Jura away, and Jura, of course, is hit with the same after effects of Rasengan Uzuhiko that we saw with Code, where he is seeing everything being, tilted. He falls to his knee. And this is where Boruto basically tells him, it basically gives him the same speech that he gave to Code about how, it feels like the world is spinning. You won't be able to stand up. Your sense of equilibrium is all fucked up. So you won't be able to essentially maintain your balance anymore. And this is where Boruto realizes that he is not dealing with the same person as he's not dealing with Code. Like, this isn't an idiot who rushes forth, without thinking. This isn't a guy who essentially like overestimates his abilities. This is a guy who operates off of pure logic. And he basically realized, after actually getting the sense of Uzuhiko, he realizes what it is and he nullifies it. That's right. He completely nullifies it. And he stands back up, no problem, where he reveals to Boruto that essentially the Rasengan Uzuhiko follows the same principle as the Bijudamas. And that's how he was able to nullify it, because he knows how the ability works and he was able to essentially, counter it. And this is a principle that is carried over from Naruto, where Itachi, when he was with Naruto, after he was reanimated, he told Naruto, or not told Naruto, excuse me, when he was in the cave against Kabuto with Sasuke, he basically revealed that every ability has a weakness. Every ability without fail has a weakness. If you give yourself enough time, you will figure out what it is. And Jura figured out what the weakness of Boruto's Rasengan Uzuhiko is. It's not just that he needs to plant his ground or his feet on the ground to be able to gather the chakra. It's also that Jura knows how the ability works and he was able to develop a counter against it. So now Boruto has just realized that all of his abilities are effectively useless against Jura. Nothing works. Even the ability that he was relying on, the Rasengan Uzuhiko, to be able to defeat Jura has basically just been rendered useless. And I do find this very interesting, because Boruto effectively is in the same position that his master Sasuke and his father Naruto were in when they went up against Jigen and then later on Ishiki, but more specifically Jigen, because both Naruto and Sasuke realized that all of their strongest attacks have basically done nothing to this guy, and the rest of their arsenal was completely useless because of Jigen's ability to shrink objects. The Sukune Hikona basically made most of their abilities completely useless, and what abilities they did have that they could use didn't work against him. And even just relying on their pure raw strength, it still wasn't enough, because he was just stronger than them after he juiced up on all of that Ten Tails chakra, which interestingly enough, that same Ten Tails is now here in front of us, in front of Naruto's child and in front of Sasuke's student. So I do just find it interesting that little bit of poetry that we have right here, I guess you could call it. Actually, let me just check something. All right, I'm back again. So sorry, just wanted to check on something real quick. But anyway, yeah, so this is where the chapter effectively ends. So yeah, Boruto is again realizing that Kashin Koji was 100% correct. And Kashin Koji, I think, yeah, he even pointed out that Boruto probably realized in this fight that he stands no chance of winning against Jura. He realized that his strongest technique, the Rasengan Uzuhiko, has been rendered completely useless. And so Boruto just cannot do anything. Like, there's nothing he can do that's going to work. And I do wonder if this is possibly where we are going to see Momoshiki show up, because outside of someone else coming in and just completely, being able to help Boruto, or Jura just leaving for whatever reason that they end up, coming up with. Boruto effectively, like, he has to die here. Like, outside of just plot convenience, there has to be a very good reason why Boruto doesn't just die here. Like, he should be able to. And outside of, like I said, maybe Momoshiki taking over and maybe using, Flying Raijin to get Boruto out of there because he can't afford to have Boruto die. And my personal opinion is, I don't think that Momoshiki taking over Boruto is going to do anything. I don't think that's going to do anything because Jura so far has not displayed even an ounce of his full power. Remember that. Even against Himawari, like, he outright stated, okay, like, I'm curious enough to use a little bit of my full power. He didn't do that with Boruto. Like, he did not do that with Boruto at all. So even if Momoshiki takes over, and he obviously is going to be stronger than Boruto is on his own, I still don't think that's going to be enough to defeat Jura. And I think Momoshiki is going to know that. And I think that he's just going to take over long enough to get Boruto out of there and just making sure nothing happens to him, because he knows that if something happens to Boruto, then he's effectively dead. He can't use Boruto to resurrect himself, but he is going to be dead if he doesn't actually do anything, or if he doesn't do anything to get Boruto out of there. So yeah, outside of that, and outside of what people have been theorizing for a while, which is Kawaki showing up and helping Boruto be able to fend off Jura, or Jura just for whatever reason just choosing to leave and not killing off Boruto. I don't know. Again, if he does do that, they have to come up with a very good reason for why that happens. But again, outside of that, Boruto absolutely should die here. Like, there's literally no reason no way for Boruto to get himself out of this. We've been told time and time again by Kashin Koji, if Boruto goes there, he dies, then they're going to have to come up with a very good reason that isn't just pure plot convenience as to why Boruto doesn't just die here. So that's personally what I'm wondering. I'm wondering, like, how are they going to solve this, in the next chapter. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I do apologize that I'm, not doing this review the way that I usually do. Just thought I'd do it right now. Cause like I said, I don't have time to, I didn't have the time, to sit down and actually make the video the way I usually do. And considering it's already been at least a week since, or at least 10 days since the chapter's been released, I didn't want to put this off any longer. So I'm just going to record this, podcast style, and just upload this to the channel. Again, similar to what I originally did with the Boruto reviews before I moved to the other style. Anyway, with that being said, guys, thank you so much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, share the video, subscribe, and make sure to hit the subscribe. No, I already said that. Make sure to comment down below is what I was trying to say, with whatever your thoughts are. And I hope I'll see you guys for my next video. Bye for now.